What's up? What's up? It's your man, One Daily Hits, with your hit for the day. And today I have a video for you of some people who have detransitioned and some that are still transitioned in regards to their sexuality. And what these people are going to be not so much debating but discussing are things like if kids should be allowed to have a sex affirming surgery. uh should they treat gender dysphoria with therapy instead of surgery? And if God intended for it to be more than two sexes. And lastly, they're going to discuss how some feel the LGBTQ community has turned their back on them once they detransition. So we'll take a look at the video so you can see what you think.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt. Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors. I repeat, gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
Medical transition is no place for a child. I transition as an adult and I have medical complications. I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day. It doesn't mean that they should.
I kind of agree with you on that as well, because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things that we need to put into place that I think would help protect our children, because the minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old. Their minds aren't fully developed, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
So I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into, no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16, before any hormones, before anything else. And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up. Because a lot of these kids will grow out of it, and many of them will just grow up and end up being gay or gender nonconforming.
Yep.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say
absolutely
it's
do.
safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same
I have
scientists...
10 studies that I can bring to you
The
right
same
now.
scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry. But trans kids are valid, and it's not a decision that they're making.
Right.
It's healthcare.
I want to speak to that real quick. Like, I came out 13 years ago when I was 14, and I knew, not that I was trans, but that I was a boy. I had to go through a lengthy process of therapy and seeing an endocrinologist and go through different tests and exams to make sure that this was real to everyone else involved. Transitioning and being trans was just a process I went through to become who I always knew I was. It wasn't a decision that I made. It was a life or death thing for me. And if I hadn't gotten on hormones and gotten surgery at 16, I don't know if I would be here.
As a father, I have 4 kids, and also as a trans person, I think that knowing what it looked like for me as a child, and that experience of going through all of the turmoil and all of the trepidation around my gender identity, I would not put my children in that situation. And also, I don't think that surgeries should be allowed for minors. Like, when we look at the data and we look at the statistics and we look at the research, the vast majority of these surgeries are happening to adults. They're not minors. So let's start there, right? And then further than that, if we look at puberty blockers are reversible. So when it comes to children, when we talk about puberty blockers, that gives them a shot.
Yeah.
And it gives them autonomy over their bodies. It gives them a space that they can explore their expression. They can explore who they are without surgeries, without all of these other things that could have permanent effects. My kids were maybe 8 and 10 when I started my transition. And so I talked to them in kid terms. I told my son, I said, look, you know, your mom, dad wants to be a dad because that's how I feel. And my kids being so young, they understood it. They were like, okay, we're with it, you know? And so as they got older, I would bring them into my world and get them to understand the things that maybe I was going through. But now that they're adults, they understand differences in people, not just trans people, but people in general.
So there is such thing as gender fluid. How
Yes.
do you know that this kid is not going to change their gender expression later on? We really actually don't have studies on children that are taken over long term, like over 10 years, 20 years. You've only been on testosterone 14 years. One of the oldest trans men, Buck Angel, he almost died from testosterone. You're saying right now it saved your life. You may still die from it. You don't know. You're
die
still
happy.
Exactly.
You'll die for ideology, and a lot of people have died for an ideology.
It's not an
But we
ideology.
have
It
more
is.
people that are
Who I am.
dying because
an
they're not
idea that you were
allowed
born
to
in the wrong
express
body.
themselves. Look at the suicide rate of transmasculine folks is at 55%. And one of the factors that could save their lives is support, right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition, how do we fix that? If you're
I
telling
think
me the transition
the
for
first thing-
children or minors is something that shouldn't be done.
The first here, I'm very sensitive to this subject, as I've been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. You know, my parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but
And
it is our transmasculine youth
I understand
that
that.
are at the highest risk
I
of
understand that,
suicide.
and they deserve help. But we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
So I have a question.
Sorry, Aris, I know you've been wanting to say
Yeah,
something.
no, because I have a big problem. Oh, yeah, no, so I'm not an interrupter. What I'm going to say is we insult children, our youth, so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions and insulting that they know who they are. Like, an adult knows who they are more than they do. No one knows who I am more than I do. Right. And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
I have a question. Do you believe minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery or consent to the list of other?
That's so different.
No, wait,
understand,
no, hold on,
I
let me
understand they
answer
are
this
different
question for
things,
you.
but to what
No, you
level
can't
do
even
we,
make that
to what level do we give children bodily autonomy over everything they do? Because here's the thing, children need barriers in childhood development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers. And I worry with the current medical system that instead of giving them a safe way to express themselves and push against barriers, we have taken some of those barriers away. And that is why you see more detransitioners, because those barriers have been lifted.
Yeah, they're not just doling out surgeries for children. That's not happening
I had a
anywhere.
letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
And
before
that
I
was
had
abuse
the first.
from that therapist who did
Yeah,
not
that-
Yeah, that's
psychoanalyze
awful.
the
That
rest of
shouldn't
your
not
issues.
happen.
Right, and that shouldn't
because
shouldn't
your
have
issues
happened
weren't
to you.
being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you're
I have a
addressing right
diagnosis
now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
And how was
Can
I,
I-
how was I supposed to do that when my parents were told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself?
But your
Yeah, that's not
parents,
your
your
fault.
parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing here.
I understand, but your
Yeah,
parents were
absolutely
responsible for the decisions that were made on your behalf.
I think that what this really highlights is the importance of you sharing your story, because what it shows is that you can't jump into these transitions, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't listen to these doctors that push you to transition just
nobody
because you're
should.
feeling a certain way.
See, me personally, I feel like kids shouldn't have to, not necessarily have to, because like you say, some may want to, but it shouldn't be a decision the kid make at that age, anything under 18, those are the adult decisions that are going to stay with their kids, for the rest of their lives. So, I think that that should be held off until they get 18, You have a lot of age restrictions on other things that you can do. So, I know people say the kids might commit suicide and this and that, and it could be true, but, I think you gotta lose a little bit one place to gain in another sometimes.
People with gender dysphoria need therapy, not surgery.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that one.
I've been convinced.
We all agree.
It's potentially both, though.
Yes.
I think everyone with gender dysphoria needs to go through a therapeutic process and mental health care before they make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
I personally confused a lot of my gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia, because no matter how much I feminize my body, till today I still don't feel comfortable in my own body. And now, looking among members of trans community, I see that people keep on getting more and more surgeries. The surgeries are no longer affirming. You can just tell that this person is struggling with body images. I was able to get on estrogen pretty quickly when I was 22, and my mental health declined afterwards, and I attributed it to being still in the wrong body, needing more body modification, end up getting sex reassignment surgery. I do believe that transition was sold to me as a hardware fix for my mental issues that were not addressed. I still struggle with internalized homophobia that pushed me into transition in the first place. I struggle with borderline personality disorder, body dysmorphia. I'm on a spectrum, and I'm ADHD, and I have all those issues that were not helped, and I was still struggling with them after transition, and I still do. Overall, after a few years, I came to a conclusion that I was not in the wrong body, that I'm a gender non-conforming man, and I am a feminine man. That's what I am.
I don't know if you guys have heard, but I've had a lot of binary trans people say that it's not a mental health issue. If you're trans, and I know I don't agree with that. I think there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. I guess I'm asking that. Do you think that it's a mental health disorder? And
I don't
needs to
think
have
being
therapy?
transgender is a mental health
disorder,
disorder. I think, gender incongruence is what they're referring to it as now. It's listed as a sexual health concern, but the gender dysphoria, which is the symptom that arises when you are transgender, is a mental health concern.
So maybe I'm thinking of that's what I'm trying to say then in a sense.
And then once you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and I feel like this is kind of what the prompt is kind of hinting at, if you do have gender dysphoria, the only treatment for that is transition. Whether that be just a social transition, a medical transition, whatever transition fits you, that is the only way to heal your gender dysphoria. When I transitioned, the first thing my mom said to me was, "Can't you just be gay?" It hurt hearing that, but a big reason that she said that was she was afraid of what my dad would think. He's always been very, very conservative, very traditional, you could say. He would make comments about trans people, about gay people growing up, so I always knew that he wasn't necessarily accepting. So when it came down to me transitioning, I said to him, I'm going to do this. Either you're going to be the dad that accepts me and supports me through it, or goodbye. And he chose to support me, and we're closer than ever now.
And I think a lot of us go through medical transitions to easier go through social transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so a lot of our folks that do transition and may detransition, both experiences are valid, but also understanding that we're not mentally ill because we're trans.
Yes.
Right. And I think that there should be a psychiatrist or someone within behavioral health to be able to say, okay, you're in the right frame of mind to make this decision. But I want to just make it very clear that trans people are not dealing with mental health because they're trans.
Absolutely.
I disagree. I feel like transgender is definitely, and elderly trans people afford for it to be classified as mental illness, so it's covered by insurance. Otherwise, why are you getting the surgeries to?
Because
if it's not a
dysphoria.
medical condition?
The dysphoria is a medical condition.
It is, but it's in your head. I would say that you have some kind of mental disorder if you're trying to mimic a stereotype of opposite sex.
Right, but it's not a mimic. It's
The treatment for this
aligning.
mental illness is to transition.
I have a question though, because I have a gender dysphoria diagnosis. I always have. But I'm still where I am today.
Can I give you my honest opinion? I think that you were probably misdiagnosed.
I don't think I was.
So you
Do you
do
feel
have gender
dysphoria in your body?
I certainly do now.
Yeah, me too.
Well, because of the
you
changes that you
want
made.
to talk about now, but at the time,
At the time, did you?
I genuinely believed I did. I thought it would save me. And then looking back, I realized that my dysphoria stemmed from some severe trauma that was not handled.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that mental health step is so important.
Yeah,
Because I've heard this from several other, mostly female detransitioners who we had some form of pretty bad trauma that spawned gender dysphoria symptoms.
Yeah.
And we can disagree about misdiagnosis or something later, but it felt real at the time for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it did. I didn't mean
And
that.
no, I know. And it's one of those things where that's where the mental health treatment really needs to come in and get to the root of that issue, because oftentimes, specifically with the detransitioners I've talked to, that was ignored. I came out to my parents in a mental health facility after telling the therapist that I thought I was transgender. And she told me we had to tell your parents so that way you can get the help you need. It led to me seeing a gender therapist who, honestly, the issues I was facing were never addressed. To this day, no one ever addressed the fact that I had severe trauma and exploitation going on as a young teenager. Instead, I was kind of just affirmed in, you believe this, and instead of even just a little pushback, it led me to the point where the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16. A few months after that, I started testosterone because it was the next step of what I was supposed to do.
In my opinion, I think it should be treated with therapy at a young age, under 18. And even as an adult, it could be treated with therapy, but after you become an adult, you can use a combination of therapy and surgery if you choose to, because, you of age and, there's a decision you can make. And, I feel like everybody should respect your decision if you decide to have those kinds of surgeries or whatever. You're an adult and you can do what you want to do, it's all about respect. So, I think at a young age, you need to hold off on that and just deal with it with therapy. And if the kid gets older, that kid can go what direction they choose, but, that's what it is.
God intended for there to be only two genders.
Okay, you go first.
Okay, so as a Christian, I truly believe that God created male and female, and He had created that throughout life, throughout the nature, throughout the wildlife, throughout Earth itself. And then the arguments come up into the ocean sides of, well, there's these asexual creatures and stuff like that. Well, they were designed that way for a reason, and we humans were not designed to. We were designed to procreate and be able to bring life back to the earth, because we live and we die, we live and we die. It's a rotation of a process of life in itself, and it's its own journey. So I truly do believe that there is male and there is female, but I can respect people's choices. However, that's where I stand on it.
Well, I'm not Christian, but I do believe there's only two biological sexes, and somehow that's how it's been designed, whether it's by higher power or by evolution. I do believe gender expression has been on a spectrum for centuries. We do have references to people who've been cross-dressing, we have references to eunuchs. And as somebody who went through transition and detransition, when I started taking testosterone, it's almost like reminded me of my original blueprint, and I feel like I went against my original blueprint and I did a lot of damage to it, and I just cannot go back to who I was, because without my testicles, I'm just too far gone in my transition. So that's where I'm at.
Can the disagree step forward?
Yeah, we have historically spent more time focusing on and celebrating several genders. There are several different cultures throughout the world that that celebrate the different genders, and to negate the fact that they exist and to negate their validity is just wrong.
There are as many intersex people as there are redheaded people on the planet. I can name 12 people off the top of my head who are born intersex. So to pretend like there's man and woman is just erasing an entire group of people. The God you speak of, the first God that intersex people get to meet is the doctor, because it's up to their discretion of just what you're gonna be when they mutilate their body to be a man or a woman, and that is not fair.
Yeah. Right.
Right, and I think also gender and male and female is not the same thing.
Biological sex are different things.
Yeah, we're talking about gender, which is like gender identity, the social aspects to being a man or a woman. But male and female dictate sex, so like body parts.
I disagree with the having sex and gender being two different things.
Okay,
I
well,
believe
that's a
them to be
fact.
one. So I believe that there is, they're the same, they're one and the same. They're not different, but we have evolutionary problems within the humanity, because I also see that there are intersex animals that do exist, and that's how they're born. But I also do believe that the initial design was for man and woman, and then somewhere along the way, viruses, mutations, diseases, plagues, all that type of stuff that we have in the world does play a part back onto the world itself. But I believe the initial intent was for God to create Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I'm just gonna say it.
That's homophobic.
I know it sounds homophobic, and I understand
No,
I'm
it
hitting.
is homophobic.
It is homophobic.
That's okay. You
Homophobia
guys,
made me transition, and that's what you're perpetuating right now. I grew up in a very homophobic family, and since I was a kid, I was always brainwashed, said gay is bad. My parents were not happy that I was naturally feminine. They always tried to make me more masculine. They tried to give me to masculine sports. I was mercilessly bullied at school for my femininity, constantly being told that I'm not a real man, that I'm a sissy. And when I came out to my parents as gay, they took me to therapists and tried to do pretty much conversion therapy on me, which failed.
So I don't believe in God. I believe in people that exist right in front of me, and I believe they should have the right to exist. And so
I'm not saying they don't have the right to exist. I'm just saying,
I'm
just saying that was the
they weren't
initial
mistakes
intent.
either. They're just here the way you and I are here right now, and they are who they are, and we have to accept people as they are.
Right, and there are biological differences in trans folks. When we look at the brainstem, you know, our brainstems are different. Like that's
Neurologically.
Right, neurologically, we're different.
Yeah,
And
male
so
and female are
how-
different, exactly.
Trans people are different.
Yes.
They've found a distinct difference in the
white matter.
cortex.
There is no biomarker for trans. Some brain scan of some gay males is identical to female brain, but there is no biomarker for trans. Please don't spread misinformation.
There is science that hints towards it. It's just not confirmed.
No, there's
confirmed.
research.
So
that's out
therefore,
there
it
that-
falls under the belief that there is, but there is no scientific fact to back that up, which therefore I believe that God's initial intent was to create male
I
and
think
female.
if God intended to, if God exists and in the way that you believe and just intended to make male and female, then
And
we
we
wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
I believe
Intersex people wouldn't
in
exist.
a higher power, right, of my own, and God is not this thing that creates rules and binary situations and laws that can be broken or really made. We're just all here.
Yeah.
You know, like I was born in a female body, but I was never a girl. Never. Ever. Ever. I can't explain why, but that is my truth. That is the fact. That is who I've always been. And there's no way that I'm gonna look up at this guy at some guide and be like, oh yeah, you made me as a mistake.
Transitioning.
And now my body dysmorphia / actual gender dysphoria as well is worse than ever before. I do feel like I'm stuck in a surgically created body. I just don't think I've been really myself by trying to become a woman. Yeah, so transition did take a lot from me.
Must be really, really hard. Yeah.
It's okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
If you had like found the results that you desired in the beginning, would you feel differently than you do now?
No, because I realize I just miss being a man, you know, I just miss being obsessed about sex and money. I don't want to do the whole emotional thing. And I'm talking about stereotypes, okay? So I regret It's just like now I'm a medical patient for life. Also having sex served back, it just reminds me that I lost all these years. I could have been having fun, whether it's chasers or I definitely have internalized homophobia. So internalized homophobia also pushed me into transition because I felt like chasers weren't good enough because I wanted to be a woman. I wanted to escape my homosexuality. But now I realize at the end of the day, I'm a gay man and I'm still living with internalized homophobia because therapists actually never helped me with that.
It's fascinating that you say that because I dated men and women, and in my transition, I felt like I had an internalized homophobia when I was with men because I didn't feel like a gay man. And that was really hard for me to like figure out because I had this journey for so long, and a lot of sexual experiences were good, but I was on Grindr and I'm sleeping with these men and they're treating me how I would want to be treated in a social setting, but I'm like, I was really, really masculine in my presentation, but I tended to be kind of feminine in my roles within sex. And so I think that also got me to realize that I wanted to detransition because it was a reflection of the relationships that I had. Like, to follow kind of some stereotypes, like I did miss being a woman in some of those like social settings, like with how women interacted with me, with how men interacted with me. Like, so yeah, that's heavily relatable to that for sure. So I do not regret my transition. Shocking, I know. That was like a really great time for me in the beginning. I really was able to explore and express myself in ways that I could not have done without hormones and surgery. I learned so much about how people treat people based on gender and looks in general. I feel like I would not be the person, especially the confidence and security that I have within myself if I didn't transition as presenting as a woman in this world. My dynamic with men in general is so much different. I mean, I was very insecure, very submissive, very quiet, and now I'm able to speak up for myself because of that.
In my opinion, God only created two sexes, you know, male and a female. I really don't want to debate that, you know. It is what it is, you know. Some people believe what they want to believe, and, you know, that's prerogative. And, you know, you got to respect everybody's beliefs, you know. And at the same time, you know, respect is a key word because they got to respect your beliefs. So, you know, if you look at a certain way and they look at a certain way, you know, it's some things that are reality. But even with that, you know, it got to be a line of respect. So, you know, it is what it is.
The LGBTQ plus community is not as accepting as they claim.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs?
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to agree. That is true information.
There's still so much transphobia within the people in the LGBT community that hasn't been addressed yet.
Shoot, there's transphobia within trans people.
Absolutely. When I was transitioning in high school, I searched for acceptance from the cis hetero world. And now I feel like I'm doing the opposite and searching for acceptance from my own community half the time. Like when I was in college, the queer community on my campus hated me because I did like heteronormative like guy stuff. I played lacrosse, I was in a frat, but like I wasn't that guy, I guess, that they had in their head. And every time I would go to the LGBT club meetings, I would get like they would stare into my soul like I was just this awful thing. And it's always just made me feel invisible and small in whatever space I'm in. And I find that just really disheartening.
And it happens in a lot of other cultures and communities as well too. So
It's funny that
just happens.
You mentioned like the transitioning in high school part and like that shift from, you know, searching for acceptance outside and then turning around and then having to search for acceptance within the community.
Yeah.
Because I did notice that when I was still living as a trans man, when, you know, when I passed really well, all of a sudden it was like I wasn't welcome in these spaces anymore. Until they knew, and then you get that icky feeling of like you only want me here because of that. And you know, now I have the D-trans aspect where no community wants me. No one. Like I'm still part of the I'm part of the LGB part, but I've lost people that I thought they liked me for me, and it didn't matter what I was.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, detransitioning was the thing that I've been called a traitor I've been,
Me too.
you know, it's,
Me too.
they don't want me. The rest of the world doesn't want me.
That's not true. That's not true.
It can often feel that way. It can feel isolated.
Yeah, but it feels really
that way.
isolating. Like, this is not a club.
It's not a
You know,
club.
and it's not like a personality trait that I'm just taking up. And God forbid one day I change my mind. I won't, but like, or something happens where I have to detransition. I would hope that the people who stood by my side through everything else would still be there for me because of who I am, period. And not because of an effing label over my head.
And even when I transitioned, I dealt with the traitor to everyone. It was, you know, oh, you want to be a man and the patriarchy. And I'm just like, I get it, but also, but what I found very interesting was like this divide between trans men and trans women. When I first started doing a lot of advocacy, I was told that just being in the space, that I was taking up too much room, that I was taking up too much space and don't speak and all of these things. And I was like, wait a minute, but I'm trans too, right? This community also belongs to us too. So that was something that I grappled with for a while.
I hung out with a lot of gay women, and then when I transitioned, I definitely lost my space there, and that was like really hard for me to navigate because being shunned out of these female spaces for me was really hard and difficult. And then when I got to the trans male community, there was a lot of competition. Who looked the best, who passed the best, like that was very difficult.
Oh yeah.
Shoot, fortunately I had a full beard, so it was like an easy, like, you know what I mean? Like, but still, like, I heavily resonate with trans men still, and I definitely resonate with trans women from detransitioning and gender non-conforming people. So it's like, where do I belong?
Weird position to be in because it's like one community, like I said, doesn't really want you, but you don't fit in. You can't really go all the way back, so you don't fit in with the rest of them.
We just shouldn't have to categorize.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't have to float around, wonder where we belong. Like,
we
it
have
shouldn't-
we
I don't
have the
understand
other
why you have to
detransitioners,
like,
but even then, we're all still vastly different individuals who have vastly different life experience, political views, religious beliefs.
Right.
You know,
You're not just
experience how we
detransitioning.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
that's no different
Experience how
with
we
the
talk
trans
about it.
community, right?
In some ways, it's empowering because it feels like you're, even though all this happened, you're being seen as an individual for almost the first time after, you know, spending my high school years being lumped in